I never thought I'd be standing in my backyard at 6 in the morning, staring down at a dead crow with its wings spread unnaturally wide, but here I was. This was the third one this week. The smell hit me first, that sickly sweet stench of decay that made my stomach turn. Someone had arranged it carefully on my prized rosebed, right where I'd see it when I came out for my morning coffee. What I'm about to tell you is absolutely true and will leave you speechless. Please like and subscribe. Tell me which city you call home. My name is Dorothy Simpson. I'm 64 years old, and I've lived in this quiet suburban neighborhood for nearly 30 years. I raised my children here, buried my first husband here, and remarried my wonderful second husband in the backyard garden I've spent decades perfecting. Never in all those years did I imagine I'd become the target of such a bizarre and disturbing campaign. I hurried back inside, my hands shaking as I poured my coffee. The kitchen felt like a sanctuary compared to the horror show outside. That's when my phone rang. "Dorothy, honey, are you all right?" It was my daughter-in-law, Sarah Simpson, who lived just 10 minutes away with my son. Her voice carried that particular note of concern that made my chest tighten. "Mrs. Patterson from down the street called me. She said people are talking." "Talking about what?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "About the dead animals, Mom." "And about—" Sarah paused, clearly uncomfortable. "About witchcraft. She said Vivian Morrison has been telling everyone that you're practicing some kind of dark magic, that you're the one killing these animals for rituals." Vivian Morrison, my next-door neighbor of 15 years, the woman who used to bring me casseroles when I was recovering from my knee surgery. The woman who'd helped me plant my vegetable garden and who I'd trusted with my spare key. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "That's absolutely ridiculous," I managed to say, but my voice cracked. "Why would she say such things?" "I don't know, but it gets worse," Sarah continued. "She's apparently been very convincing. Mrs. Patterson said some people are actually starting to believe it. They're saying you've always been a little too interested in your herb garden, that you know too much about natural remedies." I sank into my kitchen chair, looking out the window toward Vivian's perfectly manicured lawn. Her house sat just 30 feet from mine, close enough that we could chat over the fence while tending our gardens. Or at least, we used to. "There's another dead bird out there, Sarah. A crow this time. Someone put it right in my roses." The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice tight with anger. "You think it's her? You think Vivian is putting dead animals in your yard and then telling people you're killing them?" "I don't know what to think anymore." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. 3 weeks ago, she was perfectly normal. We talked about the weather, complained about the postal service. Then suddenly, she stopped speaking to me entirely. She won't even make eye contact when we're both outside. "When did the dead animals start appearing?" "Right after she stopped talking to me. First it was a squirrel by my front steps, then a rabbit near the mailbox. Now this crow. Each one more grotesque than the last." Sarah was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her thinking. She was a practical woman, a nurse who dealt with crisis situations daily. If anyone could help me figure this out, it was her. "Have you talked to anyone else about this? What about Eleanor?" Eleanor Chen had been my closest friend for over 20 years. We'd met at a community gardening class and bonded over our shared love of heirloom tomatoes and mystery novels. She lived 3 blocks away, but might as well have been next door for how often we talked. "I haven't wanted to burden her with this craziness," I admitted. "Besides, what if she's heard these rumors too? What if she starts to believe them?" "Eleanor would never believe something so ridiculous about you," Sarah said firmly. "You need to call her." and we need to figure out what's really going on with Vivian. After I hung up with Sarah, I stood at my kitchen sink, washing my coffee cup and staring out at Vivian's house. The woman I was looking for was 58, recently divorced, and had always seemed a bit lonely. We'd developed what I thought was a genuine friendship over the years. She was the type of person who remembered birthdays and always asked about my grandchildren. But now, thinking back over the past month, I started to notice things that hadn't seemed important at the time. The way she'd been watching me more closely when I worked in my garden. How she'd asked pointed questions about the herbs I grew, particularly when I mentioned using elderberry for my arthritis or chamomile for better sleep. I'd thought she was genuinely interested in natural remedies. Now I wondered if she was gathering ammunition. The phone rang again, startling me from my thoughts. "Dorothy?" Eleanor's familiar voice was warm but concerned. "I just got the strangest call from my neighbor Janet. She said there are rumors going around about you, something about dead animals and witchcraft. I told her she was being ridiculous, but I wanted to check on you." I felt tears prick my eyes. At least Eleanor was still on my side. "It's true about the dead animals," I said, and then told her everything. About finding the creatures in my yard, about Vivian's sudden coldness, about the rumors spreading through our neighborhood like wildfire. "This is absolutely insane," Eleanor said when I finished. "Vivian Morrison is behind this? The same woman who cried at your husband's funeral? Who helped organize the neighborhood watch program? I can't prove it, but the timing is too convenient. The dead animals started appearing right after she stopped speaking to me." "But why would she do such a thing? What could you possibly have done to make her turn on you like this?" That was the question that had been haunting me. I replayed every interaction I'd had with Vivian over the past few months, searching for some offense I might have unknowingly committed. Had I said something wrong? Failed to invite her to something? Somehow insulted her without realizing it? I honestly don't know, Eleanor. But I'm scared. If these rumors spread much further, they could destroy my reputation in this community. My standing at church, my volunteer work at the library, everything I've built here. "We're not going to let that happen," Eleanor said with the fierce loyalty that had made her such a treasured friend. "But we need to be smart about this. We need evidence." After I hung up, I made myself a sandwich I couldn't taste and tried to think rationally about my situation. Vivian Morrison had been my neighbor for 15 years. She was a retired bank manager, methodical and precise in everything she did. If she was behind this campaign against me, she would have had a reason. People like Vivian didn't just suddenly decide to destroy their neighbors without cause. But what could that cause possibly be? I was still pondering this question when I saw movement in Vivian's backyard. She was out there with a large black garbage bag, moving quickly and purposefully toward the fence line that separated our properties. My heart started pounding as I watched her from my kitchen window, hidden behind the curtain. She looked around nervously, as if checking to make sure no one was watching, then reached into the bag and pulled something out. Even from my kitchen window, I could see it was small and dark. Another dead animal. But instead of throwing it into my yard as I expected, she hesitated. For a long moment, she stood there holding whatever it was, staring toward my house with an expression I couldn't read from this distance. Then, to my complete surprise, she put it back in the bag and hurried inside. What was she doing? If she was the one placing dead animals in my yard to frame me, why had she stopped herself this time? My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "Dad and I are coming over this evening. We're going to figure this out together. Don't go outside alone until we get there." I smiled despite everything. My son had married well. Sarah had embraced me as a mother from the day they met, and she'd never treated me like an outsider or burden. Having her support meant everything right now. But as I watched Vivian's house for any further signs of activity, one thought kept nagging at me. If Vivian was truly behind this elaborate scheme to destroy my reputation, there had to be something more to it than simple neighborhood spite. The level of planning and maliciousness required suggested something deeper, more personal. I thought about the dead crow in my rose garden, positioned so carefully where I'd be sure to find it. I thought about the whispered conversations that must be happening all over the neighborhood. Longtime friends and acquaintances wondering if Dorothy Simpson had somehow lost her mind, or worse, if she'd always been hiding a dark secret. One small detail blew the whole thing open. That evening, I couldn't shake the image of Vivian hesitating with that bag, the way she'd looked toward my house before retreating. There was something almost guilty about her posture, or maybe fearful. It didn't match the calculated cruelty I'd been attributing to her. I was still wrestling with these thoughts when Sarah and Danny arrived with Chinese takeout and grim determination etched on their faces. "Mom, we need to talk," Danny said, setting the bags on my kitchen table with more force than necessary. "Sarah did some digging today, and what we found doesn't make sense." Sarah pulled out her phone, her expression troubled. "I called the animal control office to report the incidents. The woman I spoke with said they've had 3 other complaints in the past month about dead animals appearing in yards." My stomach dropped. 3 others? All in different neighborhoods, Sarah continued. None of them anywhere near here. And here's the strange part. In each case, the homeowner was an older woman living alone. And in each case, neighbors reported seeing lights or unusual activity around the woman's property at night. Danny sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. "So either there's someone targeting elderly women across the entire town, or what we're seeing isn't what we think it's seeing," I finished quietly. The 3 of us sat in silence for a moment, the untouched Chinese food growing cold between us. My mind was racing, trying to process this new information. If other women were experiencing similar incidents, then this wasn't about me specifically. It wasn't personal revenge or neighborhood grudges. "There's something else," Sarah said hesitantly. "I drove by here around lunchtime just to check on things. I saw Vivian in her backyard, and she looked agitated. She was pacing back and forth along the fence line, like she was upset about something." I thought about what I'd witnessed from my kitchen window, Vivian's strange behavior with the bag. I saw her too. She had something she seemed ready to throw into my yard, but then she stopped herself and went back inside. Danny frowned. "That doesn't sound like someone who's trying to frame you. That sounds like someone who's conflicted." "Or scared," Sarah added softly. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how many assumptions I'd made. Yes, Vivian had been distant lately, but distant didn't necessarily mean hostile. And her comment about being careful? What if that hadn't been a veiled threat? What if it had been genuine concern? "I think I need to talk to her," I said finally. "Absolutely not," Danny said immediately. "Mom, if she is behind this, confronting her could make things worse." But something in my gut told me that Vivian wasn't my enemy here. The woman I'd known for 15 years, who had watered my plants when I went to visit Danny after his surgery, who had never missed bringing me a plate of cookies every Christmas. That woman didn't just transform into a vindictive neighbor overnight. "What if she's not behind it?" I asked. "What if she's scared too?" Sarah and Danny exchanged glances, and I could see them weighing the possibility. "Even if that's true," Sarah said carefully, "we still don't know who is responsible. And until we do, I don't think it's safe for you to be here alone." The thought of leaving my home, even temporarily, made my chest tight with anxiety. This house held 30 years of memories, of Danny's childhood, of quiet evenings reading in my garden. The idea that someone could drive me away from it felt like losing a piece of myself. "I'm not running," I said firmly. "This is my home." Danny reached across the table and took my hand. "Then we figure this out together. But promise me you won't confront Vivian alone. If you want to talk to her, we'll be there with you." I squeezed his hand gratefully. Having them both here, solid and supportive, made the fear that had been gnawing at me for days finally feel manageable. But as we finally opened the Chinese food and tried to make normal conversation, I kept glancing out the window toward Vivian's house. The lights were on in her kitchen, and once I could have sworn I saw her silhouette pass by the window, pausing to look in my direction. Around 10 o'clock, just as Danny and Sarah were getting ready to leave, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Vivian's name, and all three of us froze. "Should I answer it?" I asked. Sarah nodded slowly. "Put it on speaker." I accepted the call with trembling fingers. "Hello, Vivian." Her voice was barely above a whisper, shaky and urgent. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something. Can you meet me by the fence? It's about what's been happening to you." "I know who's been putting those animals in your yard, and you're in more danger than you realize." The three of us stared at the phone as if it might explode. Vivian's words hung in the air like a challenge, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. "Don't go out there," Sarah whispered urgently. "This could be a trap." But there was something in Vivian's voice, a genuine terror that I recognized because I'd been living with it myself for days. "She sounds scared, Sarah. Really scared." "Mom," Danny said, his voice tight with worry. "Even if she is scared, meeting her outside in the dark is exactly what someone would want if they're trying to hurt you." I looked at Vivian's house through my kitchen window. Her porch light was on, and I could see her standing by her back door, phone still pressed to her ear. "Vivian," I said into the phone, "can you tell me over the phone, whatever it is?" "No," she said quickly. "Someone might be listening. Dorothy, please. I should have told you days ago, but I was afraid. I've been watching your house, trying to keep an eye on things, but I think they know I've figured it out." Danny grabbed a piece of paper and scribbled, "Ask her who they are." "Who are you talking about, Vivian? Who's been doing this?" There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was even more strained. "I can't say the name out loud, not on the phone. But Dorothy, you need to know, the dead animals, that's just the beginning. I heard them talking about escalating things, about making sure you leave the neighborhood for good." Sarah shook her head vigorously and mouthed, "No way," at me, but I found myself already moving toward the back door. "Wait," I said to Vivian. "Give me 2 minutes. I'm coming out, but my kids are coming with me." "Dorothy, no," Vivian said quickly. "It has to be just you. If they see a group of people, they might think I'm organizing something against them. Please, I'm trying to protect you here." "Then I'm not coming," I said firmly. "My family stays with me, or we do this another way." Danny stood up and put his hand on my shoulder. "Mom, what if we compromise? What if Sarah and I come outside but stay on the porch while you talk to Vivian by the fence? We'll be close enough to help if something goes wrong, but far enough that she won't feel like we're ganging up on her." Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but after a moment, she nodded reluctantly. "I don't like it, but that's better than Dorothy going out there alone. Vivian, I said into the phone, I'm coming out in 5 minutes. My kids will be on my porch, but I'll meet you at the fence alone. Is that acceptable? Another long pause. Okay, but Dorothy, be careful. And if you see anyone else outside, anyone at all, go back inside immediately. The line went dead, and the three of us stood there in my kitchen, the weight of the decision settling over us like a heavy blanket. I'm getting a bad feeling about this, Sarah said, running her hands through her hair. Everything about this screams setup. But what if it's not? I countered. What if Vivian really does know who's been doing this? What if she's been trying to help me all along and I've been suspecting her for nothing? Danny walked to the window and peered out at Vivian's house. She's still standing by her door. She keeps looking around like she's expecting someone. See? Sarah said. That's not the behavior of someone who just wants to have a private conversation. That's the behavior of someone who's either planning something or genuinely terrified. Which is exactly why I need to talk to her, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. If she's planning something, I need to know. If she's terrified, then we're dealing with a much bigger problem than just some neighbor dispute. I went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a small flashlight. 5 minutes. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, call the police. Make it 5 minutes, Danny said. If you're not back in 5 minutes, we're coming to get you. Sarah grabbed my arm as I headed for the door. Dorothy, listen to me. If anything feels wrong, and I mean anything, you run straight back to this house. Don't worry about being polite. Don't worry about hurting Vivian's feelings. Just run. I nodded, though my stomach was churning with anxiety. I know. I'll be careful. We moved toward the back door together, and I could feel both Danny and Sarah's tension radiating beside me. As I reached for the door handle, Danny caught my wrist. Mom, I love you. Please don't take any unnecessary risks. I won't, I promised, though I wasn't entirely sure what would constitute an unnecessary risk at this point. I opened the door and stepped out onto my back porch, immediately feeling the cool night air against my skin. Danny and Sarah followed, positioning themselves by the porch railing where they could see the entire backyard. Vivian was already at the fence that separated our properties, and as I approached, I could see that Sarah had been right. She did look terrified. Her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing over her shoulder toward the street. Dorothy, she whispered as soon as I was close enough to hear her. Thank you for coming. I know this looks strange, but I had to warn you. Warn me about what, Vivian? Who's been putting dead animals in my yard? She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. It's Marcus. Your neighbor 3 houses down? He's been telling people that you're some kind of witch, that you're bringing down property values with your dark practices. He's convinced that if he can scare you enough, you'll move away. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Marcus Henderson. I barely knew the man beyond polite waves when we passed on the street. He'd moved to the neighborhood only about 2 years ago, bought the blue house at the end of the block. That's impossible, I said. I've never even had a real conversation with Marcus. Why would he want me gone? Because you're different, Vivian said urgently. Because you grow herbs and hang your laundry outside and don't conform to his idea of what the neighborhood should look like. And Dorothy, there's more. He's planning to put something worse in your yard tomorrow night, something that will bring the police, something that will make people think you're actually dangerous. Behind me, I could hear Danny and Sarah moving restlessly on the porch, and I realized that our 5 minutes were nearly up. How do you know all this? I asked. Because he tried to recruit me, Vivian whispered. He came to my house 3 days ago, told me that we needed to take care of the witch problem before it got out of hand. He wanted me to corroborate his stories, to tell people I'd seen you doing strange things in your backyard. And you said no. Of course I said no. Dorothy, I've known you for 15 years. You're the kindest person in this neighborhood. But Marcus, he's not going to stop. And I think he knows that I'm not going to help him. Just then, I heard the soft sound of a car door closing somewhere on the street, and Vivian's face went white with fear. He's here, she breathed. Dorothy, get back inside, now. I didn't need to be told twice. My heart was pounding as I hurried back toward the house, but I moved as quietly as possible across the grass. Behind me, I could hear Vivian's hurried footsteps as she retreated to her own back door. Danny and Sarah were both standing now, tension radiating from their postures as I climbed the porch steps. We slipped inside, and Danny immediately turned off the kitchen light, plunging us into darkness. Through the window, we could see the faint outline of a figure moving along the street, but the shadows made it impossible to make out any details. What did she say? Sarah whispered, her voice tight with concern. I led them to the living room, away from the windows facing the street, before I answered. Even then, I kept my voice low as I repeated everything Vivian had told me about Marcus and his campaign to drive me out of the neighborhood. Danny's face grew darker with each detail. So, this guy I've never even met has decided you're some kind of threat? That's insane. It gets worse, I said, sinking into my armchair. Vivian said he's planning something for tomorrow night. Something that would bring the police. Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, leaning forward. Like what? What could he possibly do that would be worse than dead animals? I don't know, and that's what scares me. I rubbed my temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. Vivian didn't have specifics, just that it would make people think I'm actually dangerous. Danny started pacing, which was never a good sign. When my son got agitated, he needed to move. We can't just sit here and wait for this guy to escalate. There has to be something we can do. Like what? I asked. March down to his house and confront him? That would just make me look unstable. You could try talking to him, Sarah suggested. Maybe if he actually got to know you, he'd realize how ridiculous this whole thing is. I shook my head. According to Vivian, he tried to recruit her into this crusade of his. This isn't about misunderstanding me, Sarah. This is about him deciding I don't belong here and doing whatever it takes to make that happen. Danny stopped pacing and turned to face me. Then we need evidence. We need to catch him in the act. That could be dangerous, I said. What if he's more unhinged than we think? What if confronting him makes things worse? Sarah stood up and moved to the window, carefully peering out through the curtains. I don't see anyone out there now, but Danny's right about needing proof. Without it, it's just your word against his. And he's already been spreading stories about me, I added bitterly. Who are people more likely to believe? The quiet woman with the herb garden, or the concerned neighbor trying to protect the community? Danny came over and sat on the arm of my chair. Mom, you've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. You've helped half these people with their gardens, watched their kids, taken in packages when they were out of town. That has to count for something. I wanted to believe him, but I could feel doubt creeping in. Does it, though? How well do any of us really know our neighbors? And if Marcus is convincing enough, if he frames it as concern for everyone's safety? Stop, Sarah said firmly, turning away from the window. Don't let him get in your head like this. You haven't done anything wrong. I know that, I said, but knowing it and proving it are two different things. The room fell quiet as we all absorbed the weight of the situation. Outside, a car drove slowly down the street, its headlights briefly illuminating our front yard before moving on. I found myself wondering if it was Marcus, checking to see if we were still awake, still watching. "We need a plan," Danny said finally. "We can't just react to whatever he does next. We need to be proactive." "What did you have in mind?" I asked. Danny looked at Sarah, then back at me. "Tomorrow night, we'll be ready for him. All of us." "Danny, I don't like the sound of that," I said, studying my son's face. "What exactly are you suggesting we do?" He rubbed his hands together, the way he always did when he was working through a problem. "We set up some kind of surveillance. Maybe take shifts watching from the window. If he shows up with another dead animal, we document it. Take photos, video, whatever we can get." Sarah crossed her arms. "And then what? Even if we catch him on camera, what's to stop him from claiming he found the animal and was just cleaning up our yard?" "That's a good point," I admitted. "Marcus seems like the type who'd have an excuse ready for everything." "Then we need to catch him placing the animals, not just near them," Danny said. "We need clear evidence of him actually putting them there." The thought of watching my neighbor deliberately place dead creatures in my yard made my stomach turn. I'm not sure I can handle seeing that happen in real time. It's bad enough discovering them after the fact. "You wouldn't have to watch alone," Danny assured me. "I'll take the overnight shift. You and Sarah can split the evening hours if you want." Sarah moved away from the window and sat back down on the couch. "This whole thing feels like we're turning into prisoners in your own home, having to watch and wait and document everything because one person has decided to terrorize you." "I know," I said quietly, "but what choice do I have? If I don't defend myself, who will?" "Maybe we should think about this differently," Sarah said, leaning forward. "Instead of just trying to catch Marcus in the act, what if we tried to understand why he's so fixated on you specifically? I mean, you've had that herb garden for years. Why is it suddenly a problem now?" I thought about that for a moment. You know, now that you mention it, this all started shortly after I helped Mrs. Chen with her arthritis remedies. Remember? She was having such a hard time with the pain, and I gave her some willow bark tea and that salve with arnica. "The one that worked really well for her?" Danny asked. "Yes, she was so grateful and she told several people about it. Maybe that's when Marcus started paying attention to what I was doing." Sarah nodded slowly. "So this might not be about witchcraft at all. It might be about you helping people in a way that threatens his worldview somehow. Or makes him feel powerless?" I added. "Some people don't like it when others have knowledge or skills they don't understand." Danny stood up and started pacing again. "That actually makes it worse, doesn't it? If this is really about control and intimidation, he's not going to stop just because we ask nicely." The weight of that realization settled over all of us. I pulled the throw blanket tighter around my shoulders, suddenly feeling very tired. "Mom, are you okay?" Danny asked, noticing my expression. "I keep thinking about what Vivian said, about him trying to get her involved in this campaign against me. It makes me wonder how many other people he's approached. How many of my neighbors have heard his version of events and never bothered to ask me about any of it." "You can't think like that," Sarah said firmly. "You'll drive yourself crazy trying to guess what other people are thinking or saying." "But it's hard not to," I replied. "When I was getting my mail yesterday, I noticed Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down cross the street instead of walking past my yard like she usually does. Maybe it was nothing, but maybe it wasn't. Danny stopped pacing and looked at me with concern. Mom, you can't start questioning every interaction with every neighbor. That's exactly what Marcus wants. He wants you to feel isolated and paranoid. I know that, I said. But knowing it and feeling it are two different things. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. That's why we're going to do something about this. Danny's right about getting evidence, but we need to be smart about it. We can't let this consume our lives. What if we set a time limit? I suggested. Say 1 week of surveillance. If we don't catch him in that time, we'll try a different approach. Like what? Danny asked. I don't know yet. Maybe we'll think of something else by then. Sarah looked between Danny and me. 1 week sounds reasonable, but we need to be careful about this. If Marcus realizes we're watching for him, he might get more creative about how he harasses you. The thought of Marcus escalating his behavior sent a chill through me. Do you really think he would do something more serious? I think anyone who puts dead animals in someone's yard is already doing something pretty serious, Danny said grimly. Your son's right, Sarah agreed. This isn't normal neighbor behavior, even for someone who's genuinely concerned about something. Normal people would try talking to you first, or maybe contact whoever they thought should know about their concerns. Instead, he went straight to intimidation tactics, I said, the reality of it sinking in deeper. That suggests he's either not thinking clearly or he's more calculating than we want to believe. Danny sat back down on the arm of my chair. Either way, we need to be prepared. Tomorrow night, we start keeping watch. But we also need to talk about what we'll do if we actually catch him, and what we'll do if something goes wrong. What do you mean, if something goes wrong? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. I mean, what if he sees us watching? What if he confronts one of us? What if he brings someone else with him next time? The questions hung in the air between us, each one more unsettling than the last. Outside, I heard a door slam somewhere in the neighborhood, and all three of us immediately tensed, listening. But whatever it was passed without incident, leaving us alone with our plans and our fears. We'll figure it out as we go, Sarah said finally. Right now, let's just focus on tomorrow night. I nodded, trying to feel more confident than I actually did. As I looked at my son and my friend, both of them willing to lose sleep to help me deal with this nightmare, I felt a mixture of gratitude and guilt. Thank you both, I said quietly. I know this isn't your problem, but I can't tell you how much it means to me that you're here. Mom, of course we're here, Danny said. You don't have to thank us for that. Sarah smiled at me. Besides, what are friends for if not to help you catch your creepy neighbor in the act of animal placement? Despite everything, I found myself laughing a little at that. When you put it like that, it sounds almost manageable. That's the spirit, Danny said. Tomorrow night, we'll be ready for whatever Marcus has planned. But even as I agreed with him, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had no idea what we were really preparing for. The next day dragged by with excruciating slowness. Every time I looked out the window, I found myself scanning the yard for any new additions, my stomach clenching each time I spotted a shadow or an unfamiliar shape. By evening, my nerves were completely frayed. Danny arrived at 7 with a thermos of coffee and a grim expression. I've been thinking about this all day, he said, setting his things down in the kitchen. We need to talk about what we're actually going to do if we see him. What do you mean? I asked, though I'd been wrestling with the same question. I mean, do we confront him? Do we call the police? Do we just record it and use it as evidence later? Sarah knocked on the back door before I could answer, and I let her in. She looked as tired as I felt, and I realized this situation was taking a toll on all of us. I couldn't concentrate on anything today, she said without preamble. I kept thinking about what kind of person does something like this, and honestly, it's starting to scare me. That's what I was just talking to Mom about, Danny said. We need a plan for tonight. Sarah nodded and sat down at the kitchen table. I think we need to be really careful about confronting him directly. Someone who's been escalating like this might not react well to being caught. But we can't just let him keep doing it, I protested. This has gone on long enough. I'm not saying we let him keep doing it, Sarah said patiently. I'm saying we need to be smart about how we handle it. What if we record everything first, then decide what to do? Danny frowned. Record it with what? My phone? That's actually not a bad idea, I said slowly. If we have video evidence, it gives us options. Okay, but what if he sees us recording? Danny asked. What if he comes after one of us? The question hung in the air, and I felt that familiar chill of fear. Do you really think he would do that? Mom, I honestly don't know what to think anymore, Danny said. A week ago, if someone had told me our neighbor was putting dead animals in our yard, I would have said they were crazy. Now I'm sitting here planning a stakeout. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We don't have to figure out every possibility tonight. Let's just focus on watching and documenting. We can make other decisions as we need to. You're right, I said, trying to calm my racing thoughts. One step at a time. Danny pulled out his phone and started checking the camera function. The quality isn't great in low light, but it's better than nothing. What time do you think he usually comes by? Sarah asked. It's been different each time, I said. The first time I found something, it was early morning, so he might have come during the night. The second time was definitely sometime after midnight because I checked the yard before bed. So, anywhere between midnight and dawn, Danny said. That's a long window. We'll take shifts, Sarah suggested. 2 hours each, maybe? Actually, I said, I think I should take the first watch. This is my problem, and I feel terrible that you're both losing sleep over it. Mom, we've been through this, Danny said firmly. You're not doing this alone. Besides, Sarah added, you've been dealing with this stress for days. You need rest more than either of us do. I started to argue, but Danny cut me off. No discussion. Sarah and I will split the first shift, and you can take the morning watch if nothing happens before then. Looking at their determined faces, I realized there was no point in arguing. Fine, but I want you to wake me up if anything happens. Anything at all. Deal, Sarah said. Danny stood up and walked to the living room window that faced Marcus's house. His lights are still on. Do you think he knows we're watching? How could he? I asked, joining him at the window. I don't know. Maybe he's noticed us being more alert, or maybe he's just naturally paranoid. Sarah came over to look as well. The lights being on doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's only 9:30. As if on cue, Marcus's front door opened and he stepped out onto his porch. All three of us immediately stepped back from the window, even though we were far enough away that he couldn't possibly see us. Is he looking over here? I whispered. Danny carefully peered around the edge of the curtain. He's just getting his mail. Wait, no. He's walking toward his garage. What's he doing? Sarah asked. I can't tell from here. He went around the side of his house. We waited in tense silence for several minutes before Danny spoke again. He's back, going inside now. This is ridiculous, I said, stepping away from the window. We're acting like we're the ones doing something wrong. I know, Sarah said sympathetically. But until we know what we're dealing with, it's better to be cautious. Danny was still watching the house. His lights just went out, the living room ones anyway. Already? I checked the clock. It's not even 10. Maybe he goes to bed early, Sarah suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe he's planning another visit tonight, Danny said grimly. The thought sent another wave of anxiety through me. I don't think I can handle finding another dead animal in my yard. You won't have to, Sarah said firmly. We're going to catch him tonight. I can feel it. Danny finally turned away from the window. I hope you're right. I don't know how many more sleepless nights I can handle. None of us do, I said. But after tonight, one way or another, we'll know what we're dealing with. As we settled in to wait for midnight, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was right. Tonight felt different somehow. Tonight, we were going to get answers. But as Marcus's house remained dark and silent across the yard, I began to wonder if we were prepared for what those answers might be. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. By 11:30, my nerves were stretched so thin I could barely sit still. Sarah had made another pot of coffee, and Danny was doing his third check of all the door locks. Maybe he's not coming tonight, I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. Part of me was relieved at the thought of a peaceful night, but another part desperately wanted this nightmare to end. It's still early, Sarah replied, settling back into her chair by the kitchen window. Remember, you said you usually find the animals in the morning. He probably waits until he thinks everyone's asleep. Danny joined us in the kitchen, moving quietly in the darkness. We'd turned off all the lights an hour ago to avoid being seen. His house is still completely dark, not even a bathroom light. That's actually kind of suspicious, I said. Most people get up at least once during the night. Unless he's not in there at all, Sarah suggested. Maybe he parked somewhere else and walked back. The thought made my stomach clench. You think he's already out there somewhere, watching us? I don't know, Danny admitted. But if he is, we'll be ready for him. We fell into another stretch of tense silence. The old house seemed to amplify every small sound. The refrigerator humming, the water heater clicking on, the floorboards settling. Each noise made us all freeze and listen intently. At 12:15, Danny suddenly held up his hand. Did you hear that? Sarah and I both strained to listen. For a moment, there was nothing but the usual nighttime sounds. Then I heard it too, a soft scraping noise coming from somewhere outside. Where is it coming from? I whispered. Danny moved carefully to the back door, peering through the small window. I can't see anything. It's too dark. The scraping sound came again, followed by what sounded like footsteps on gravel. He's here, Sarah breathed. What do we do? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it could be heard throughout the house. We stick to the plan. Danny, can you see him? Not yet. The sound is coming from the side yard, I think, near your garden. I felt sick. That's exactly where I'd found the last dead rabbit. We have to go out there. Not yet, Sarah said firmly. Let's wait until we know exactly where he is. We don't want to stumble around in the dark and lose him. Another sound reached us, definitely footsteps this time, moving slowly along the side of the house. Then everything went quiet again. Where did he go? I whispered after several minutes of silence. Danny was still pressed against the back door window. I lost him. I can't see anything. Maybe he heard us, Sarah suggested. Or maybe he's finished whatever he was doing, I said, dreading what we might find in the morning. But then a new sound made us all freeze, the soft squeak of my front gate opening. He's leaving, Danny said, going back toward the street. I started toward the front door, but Sarah grabbed my arm. Wait, let's make sure he's really gone first. We waited another 10 minutes before Danny finally moved away from the window. I think he's gone. I can't hear anything anymore. Should we go check what he left? I asked, though every part of me recoiled from the idea. Not tonight, Sarah said decisively. It's too risky. What if he's still out there waiting? But what if it's something that will attract other animals, or smell terrible by morning? Then we'll deal with it tomorrow, Danny said. Sarah's right. We can't risk going out there in the dark. I knew they were right, but the thought of whatever Marcus had left in my yard was going to make sleep impossible. I hate this. I hate feeling like a prisoner in my own home. I know, Sarah said, putting her arm around my shoulders. But we heard him tonight. We know for certain it's him now. The question is, what do we do about it? Danny asked. Before anyone could answer, we heard another sound that made our blood run cold. The soft scrape of footsteps, but this time they were coming from a different direction entirely. He's back, I whispered, terror flooding through me. But as we listened more carefully, Sarah's face went pale in the dim light filtering through the windows. Those footsteps, she said quietly, they're coming from inside the house. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. We all froze, straining to listen, and there it was again, the unmistakable sound of someone moving through my house. How is that possible? Danny whispered, his voice barely audible. We've been here the whole time. My mind raced through the possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. The basement, I breathed. There's a basement window that doesn't latch properly. I keep meaning to fix it. Sarah's grip tightened on my arm. You think Marcus has been getting into your house? The footsteps came again, slow and deliberate, coming from what sounded like my living room. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. We need to get out of here, Danny said, moving toward the back door. Now. But I shook my head, surprising myself with my own resolve. No, I'm tired of running from this, tired of being afraid in my own home. Are you insane? Sarah hissed. If Marcus is inside your house, we need to call the police and get out. And say what? That we think our neighbor might be inside? We don't have proof it's him. The footsteps had stopped, but somehow that was worse than hearing them. The silence stretched between us, thick with fear and indecision. Look, I continued, keeping my voice as low as possible. We came here tonight to catch him in the act. Well, this is definitely an act worth catching him at. Breaking and entering is a real crime with real consequences. Danny looked at me like I'd lost my mind. It's also really dangerous. What if he's not just some harmless eccentric? What if he's actually dangerous? That thought had occurred to me too, but I pushed it down. Then we need to know that now, before this gets any worse. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. She's right, but we do this smart. We stay together. We document everything we can, and at the first sign of real danger, we run. We stood there in my kitchen, 3 adults psyching ourselves up to confront an intruder in my own home. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on me, but neither was the very real fear coursing through my veins. My phone has a video recorder, Danny said quietly. If we can get footage of him inside your house, that's evidence the police can't ignore. I nodded, grateful for his practical thinking. The kitchen light switch is behind you. When I say go, flip it on, and we walk into the living room together. What if he runs? Sarah asked. Then at least we'll see his face clearly. We positioned ourselves by the kitchen doorway that led into the living room. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. Danny had his phone ready, finger poised over the record button. "On 3, I whispered. 1, 2. A loud crash came from the living room, followed by what sounded like my coffee table being knocked over. Then we heard something that chilled us to the bone. Marcus's voice, talking to himself in a low, sing-song tone. "Pretty little witch," he was saying. "Pretty little spells need pretty little presents. Where does the witch keep her secrets?" Sarah and I exchanged horrified looks. He wasn't just leaving dead animals anymore. He was searching through my house. 3, I whispered, and Danny hit the lights. The sudden brightness revealed Marcus standing in my living room, his back to us, rifling through the drawers of my end table. He was wearing dark clothes and what looked like surgical gloves. When the light hit him, he spun around, and I saw his face clearly for the first time in weeks. His eyes were wild, unfocused, and there was something in his expression that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just neighborhood harassment anymore. This was something much more dangerous. "Well, well," Marcus said, his voice eerily calm despite being caught red-handed. "The little witch and her coven. How perfect." Danny's phone trembled in his hands, but he kept recording as Marcus took a step toward us. The man's eyes had a glassy quality that made my skin crawl, and there was something smeared on his shirt that I didn't want to identify. "Marcus, you need to leave my house right now," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite my racing heart. He tilted his head at an unnatural angle, studying me like I was some fascinating specimen. "But we're just getting started, witch. I brought you another gift." He gestured toward my couch, where I now saw a plastic bag that hadn't been there before. Sarah stepped closer to me, her hand finding my elbow. "We've called the police," she lied smoothly. "They're on their way." Marcus laughed, a sound that made all 3 of us instinctively take a step back. "The police don't understand what you are, but I do. I've been watching, learning. Do you know what happens to witches who don't appreciate their gifts?" "Listen, man," Danny said, his voice cracking slightly. "You're clearly not well. Let us help you get some assistance." "I don't need help from witch sympathizers." Marcus's attention shifted to Danny, and I saw something dark flash across his face. "Are you part of her coven too? Is that why you're always here? Always protecting her?" The question hung in the air, and I realized with growing horror that Marcus had been watching more closely than I'd imagined. He knew Danny had been staying over, helping me feel safe. He'd been cataloging our routines, our relationships. "We're family," Danny said firmly. "And you're trespassing." "Family." Marcus rolled the word around like he was tasting something bitter. "The witch corrupts everyone around her. First the blonde one?" He nodded toward Sarah. "Now you. How many others?" Sarah's grip on my arm tightened. "Margaret, we need to go. Now." But Marcus was blocking our path to the front door, and the kitchen behind us was a dead end. My mind raced through options, trying to remember everything I'd ever learned about dealing with unstable people. "Marcus," I said carefully, "what is it you think I've done? Why are you so angry with me?" His expression shifted, becoming almost childlike. "You moved in, and everything changed. The neighborhood was quiet before, peaceful. But then you came with your dark energy, and now everything's wrong." I realized we might be dealing with more than just harassment. Marcus seemed genuinely delusional, living in a reality where I was some kind of supernatural threat to his world order. I'm just a normal person, I said gently. I work at an insurance office. I don't practice witchcraft or anything else. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Lies. The word exploded from him, and he grabbed a framed photo from my mantel, hurling it against the wall. The glass shattered, and Sarah flinched against me. Danny stepped forward slightly, still recording, but positioning himself between Marcus and us. That's enough. You've damaged her property, you've broken into her home, and you're threatening people. This ends now. You don't give me orders, witch friend. Marcus reached into his jacket, and my blood turned to ice. I came here to finish this properly. Run! I whispered to Sarah and Danny, but none of us moved. We were frozen in that horrible moment between fear and action, watching a clearly disturbed man reach for something that could change all our lives forever. Marcus's hand emerged from his jacket, holding not a weapon, but a small leather journal filled with what looked like photographs. I have evidence, he said, his voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper. Pictures of all your midnight activities. The police will understand once they see what you really are. He began flipping through the pages, and I caught glimpses of what appeared to be photos of my house at various times, my yard, even shots through my windows. The violation of it made me feel sick. This is stalking, Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger now instead of fear. You've been stalking her, taking pictures, breaking into her home, and harassing her for weeks. You're the criminal here, not Margaret. Marcus looked at her with something like pity. The witch has blinded you completely. Look at the evidence. He held up a photo that showed me taking out my garbage at night. Midnight rituals, disposing of spell components. The disconnect between reality and his interpretation was so complete that I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. Relief because he wasn't some criminal mastermind, just a very sick man who needed help. Terror because sick people could be just as dangerous as calculating ones. Marcus, I tried again. I think you should talk to someone about these feelings you're having. There are people who can help you sort through this confusion. His face twisted with rage. I'm not confused. You're the one who... The sound of sirens in the distance cut through his words, growing closer. Danny and Sarah both looked surprised, and I realized that while we'd been talking about calling the police, someone actually had. Marcus heard them too, and his entire demeanor shifted. The wild-eyed zealot was suddenly replaced by something more calculating and infinitely more frightening. Well then, he said, carefully closing his journal and tucking it back into his jacket. I suppose our little chat will have to continue later. The sirens were getting closer, and I could see the calculation behind Marcus's eyes as he weighed his options. For a moment, I thought he might bolt, but instead, he straightened his shoulders and adopted an expression of wounded innocence that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier rage. Marcus, just stay calm, I said, though my own heart was hammering. The police are coming, and this can all get sorted out properly. He looked at me with what seemed like genuine confusion. Sorted out? Margaret, I'm the one who's been trying to help this neighborhood. You're the problem here. His voice had taken on that reasonable tone again, the one that made him sound like a concerned citizen instead of someone who'd been terrorizing me for weeks. Sarah stepped closer to me, and I could feel her trembling slightly. Mom, he really believes what he's saying, doesn't he? The police cars turned onto our street, their red and blue lights painting the evening in harsh, urgent colors. Marcus watched them approach with an almost serene expression, still clutching that horrible journal of photographs. Danny moved to stand between Marcus and the rest of us as the officers got out of their cars. "Officers," he called out, "this man has been harassing my mother-in-law, breaking into her home and leaving dead animals in her yard." But Marcus was already walking toward the police, his journal held high like some kind of holy text. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I've been documenting illegal activities in this neighborhood for weeks. This woman has been practicing witchcraft, and I have photographic evidence." I watched the two young officers exchange a glance, and I could see them trying to process what they were dealing with. Marcus looked like any other concerned neighbor, well-dressed and articulate, while the rest of us probably looked exactly like what we were: scared, exhausted people who'd been through too much. "Sir, we're going to need you to step back," one of the officers said to Marcus, his hand resting casually on his belt. "We've received multiple complaints about harassment and property damage." Marcus's face fell slightly. "Complaints? But I'm the one who's been calling you people for weeks. I've left messages. I've tried to report what's been happening here. No one would listen." The other officer was looking at Danny. "Are you the one who called this in?" Danny shook his head, looking as confused as I felt. "No, we were just talking about calling." That's when it hit me. Marcus himself must have called the police, probably expecting them to come and arrest me based on his evidence. The irony would have been funny if the situation weren't so serious. "I called," Marcus said proudly, holding up his journal again. "I have weeks of documentation. Midnight activities, strange smells, dead animals appearing after her rituals. She's been practicing witchcraft right here in our neighborhood." The first officer took the journal, flipping through it briefly. I could see his expression change as he took in page after page of photographs that were clearly taken without permission, many through windows and at odd hours. "Sir," the officer said carefully, "this appears to be documentation of stalking behavior. These photos were taken without permission, many from private property." Marcus's confident expression faltered. "But the evidence. She's been—" "Ma'am," the second officer addressed me, "have you given this man permission to photograph your home and activities?" "Absolutely not," I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "I've asked him repeatedly to leave me alone. He's been putting dead animals in my yard. He broke into my house today, and he's been watching me for weeks." Sarah stepped forward. "He was just threatening us before you arrived. He's been terrorizing my mother for no reason." I watched Marcus's face as the reality of his situation began to sink in. The certainty that had carried him through weeks of harassment was cracking, replaced by confusion and something that might have been fear. "But I was protecting the neighborhood," he said, his voice smaller now. "The animals, the smells. Something was wrong." "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," the first officer said, not unkindly. "There are some things we need to sort out." As they led Marcus toward their car, he kept looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger anymore, but it wasn't understanding either. It was more like he was seeing me for the first time and couldn't figure out how I fit into the story he'd been telling himself. "What happens now?" Sarah asked quietly as we watched the police car disappear down the street. Danny put his arm around both of us. "Now we figure out how to move forward, together." Looking at my son and daughter-in-law, I realized that despite everything Marcus had put us through, something good had come from this ordeal. We'd faced something frightening together, and we'd come out stronger. That was worth more than all the dead rabbits and broken windows in the world.